What's going on, guys? My name is Chris and welcome to It's Complicated. It is a show where I talk about and showcase mostly mechanical wristwatches. Today, I'm going to be explaining to you guys, visualizing to you guys about how there is always a reason to buy another watch. And that rabbit hole can run too deep if you keep going. Here we go. Perhaps you're interested in the watch's history. Perhaps there's just a nicer finish and more polish on the movement inside the watch you're wearing. Perhaps the movement is more accurate than the one inside your watch. Or maybe the watch is an upgraded version of one of the ones in your collection. Maybe you just never heard of the watch and were completely unaware of its existence until recently. But I'm sure any watch collector out there has found another reason to buy another watch. I'm sure a lot of you guys have already talked yourself out of collecting a watch here and there because that rabbit hole is almost never ending. And that's really the same with collecting anything. There was a guy I was watching on YouTube and he was talking about the original Pokemon cards that came out in like 2000. An original, untampered with box of those. I think there's 24 in a box. An original box of those sells on eBay for like $175,000. I bet some of you out there wish that you had one of those sitting in a safe or something. That just blew my mind. But you know, the same thing can be said about collecting mechanical wristwatches. Some of these things just keep going up in value, and then you find out about other ones and you're like, wow, you know, I would love to wear that on my wrist. I like the history behind that, etc. And sometimes, like I said, you got to talk yourself out of diving deeper into that hole because it is almost never ending. What I did today is I made a bar graph up to visualize how never ending that rabbit hole really is. And I wanted to show you guys how watch collecting is basically relative. It's all relative. Now let me visualize that for you guys. Let's check it out. All right, so you are 4 years old. Your parents buy you a Happy Meal and you get a free Ronald McDonald LCD watch. The Happy Meal was $4 and change. Then you get a bit older, and when you're 10, someone buys you a Timex for $25. This thing has the Indiglow, and as a 10-year-old, you think this is a pretty nice watch. Then you're in high school, you're more aware of nicer watches existing, and you hear of the Casio G-Shock. You're impressed, and again, you know there's nicer watches, but you feel like this is in a fair price range to ask for Christmas or something, and you do end up getting it for Christmas. It's the nicest watch you have. Now, maybe you get your first job and you're interested in mechanical watches. You start learning about them and you hear of the Seiko SKX 007. You hear it's a big success, so you end up spending about $180 of your hard-earned money on this thing. And take a minute to look at that McDonald's watch now. It's almost completely irrelevant on this bar graph. Time marches on, maybe you get it as some kind of graduation gift, whatever, but you get a modern day Hamilton field watch. This one costs about $364 and change. It's the most expensive watch you've had, and compared to that Ronald McDonald watch, even compared to the Timex, this thing is way, way more expensive. Well, then you get a bit older and your love for mechanical watches continues. So you want to grab yourself an Omega. You want to grab yourself that Omega Diver's watch. So you grab a 1990s Omega Seamaster, similar to the one that Bond wore in GoldenEye. Granted, his was quartz. So you could even argue that your watch is nicer than James Bond's Omega in GoldenEye, although yours doesn't have a laser. Can't get much better than this, though. Look at all the other watches. And the McDonald's watch isn't even 1 pixel anymore on this bar graph. Years go by and now you want a Rolex. You talk yourself into buying a late 1990s model Datejust, no box, no papers, but now that Omega has shrunk quite a bit on this scale, hasn't it? And the Rolex is on top. The Timex and the G-Shock are just down to a few pixels. The Rolex and the Omega are the only ones that really matter on this scale. Now you keep looking at the Rolex, you keep looking at the Omega, well now you want the Rolex Diver. You want arguably Rolex's most recognized watch. You want the Submariner. You can't afford a brand new one, so you're looking at the 5-digit Submariner. You look at it for quite a while and you find one box and papers for $9,100. And man, how could it get better than the Rolex Submariner? Boom, Rolex Daytona Panda. All steel, you pay just over $27,000 for it. You're doing good. You're not going to be on that wait list. You're just going to pay $27,000 and buy the Rolex Daytona Panda. Look how tiny that Hamilton got. It's barely hanging on. Then you fall in love with the Patek Philippe Nautilus chronograph. And that one blows almost everything else out of the water at almost $110,000. Now the Omega is almost irrelevant as far as this bar graph is concerned. Well, you've already bought one of the big three, so why not buy another one of the big three? You talk yourself into buying an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak in Rose Gold. That one costs just about $175,000. And look how small that Daytona Panda is on this graph. Many Rolex fans think of this Daytona Panda as the grail of their collection, and it's barely hanging on compared to the Patek and the AP. So time continues, and you're doing very well for yourself. You're quite wealthy, and you want another watch. You want a better watch, so you decide you're going to buy this Jaeger-LeCoultre Grand Sonnerie, and it's a whopping $2.5 million. But you don't care. You're doing great. You're a wealthy man, and look at this. Every other watch on this list, the Seamaster is about 1 pixel big now, and everything under this Sonnerie is basically vanished. And maybe this story is a fictional take on the guy who bought it, but pow! Paul Newman's Daytona, the most expensive watch sold to this day, if I'm not mistaken, and he shelled out a banging $17.8 million. It basically wipes everything else out on this list. Even the Grand Sonnerie is wrecked with the Paul Newman Daytona. And really, look at this. It's all relative, and basically there's always a nicer watch. And that just about wraps it up. I hope you guys enjoyed that bar graph. Took a little time to make, but I think it did a great job of visualizing how crazy the wristwatch collecting rabbit hole can really get. And again, that goes for collecting just about anything. Come on, a box of Pokemon cards being $175,000. That's unreal. That is unbelievable to me. But look at watch collecting. It's really not that unbelievable once you see it on a scale with Paul Newman's $17 million Rolex Daytona that was gifted to him. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of It's Complicated. Please subscribe to the show. Like this video for me. That helps me out a lot. And you know what? If you don't like the video, make sure to hit that dislike button for me as well. And we'll see you next time on another episode of It's Complicated.